You may recall that back in January 2018, a huge story broke from 3 French media outlets about allegations of a toxic work environment in Quantic Dreams, the game studio founded by David Cage. For those who don't know who David Cage is, he's best known for narrative-driven adventure games such as Indigo Prophecy, Heavy Rain, and Beyond Two Souls. You may also know him for his upcoming game, Detroit Become Human, which will be out in just a month as of the publishing of this video on May 25th, 2018. Overall, I would say that the man's pretty infamous in the gaming industry for having these grand and intriguing ideas, but often leaving a lot to be desired in their execution. But his reputation took a pretty serious hit once allegations of a toxic work environment began to spread. So in case you aren't familiar with that whole debacle, here's a great summary by website Eurogamer. It all began with the discovery of a cache of around 600 inappropriate photoshopped images of various employees at the studio, with some of the worst offenders presenting employees in sexual positions, adorned with homophobic or sexist slurs, or even made to look like Nazis, according to what Eurogamer translated from website Le Monde. These images date as far back as 2013 and were sent via group emails all across the company, with Quantic Dream heads David Cage and Guillaume de Fondomière being among the recipients. But it wasn't until February 2017 that Quantic Dream's IT managers became the subject of one of these images, and then the full cache was later discovered before complaints were made. When asked if they were aware that such images were being spread across the studio by Le Monde, David Cage and de Fondomière responded that they had not seen the worst images before then, only one that, quote, were funny or more or less amusing. The discovery of these images then became the catalyst that resulted in a deeper investigation on Quantic Dream's work conditions, which, according to Eurogamer, is, quote, a studio of 180 people, 83% of which are apparently male, and where there is reportedly a picture of a penis with farting testes on the wall. Those who came forward about their experience working at the studio to French websites Le Monde, Mediapart, and Canard PC talked about how David Cage in particular is hard to work with, citing his tendency to demand long working hours, to refuse to listen to his peers, to lack consideration for female colleagues by making dirty jokes or smutty remarks in the presence of his wife, to make inappropriate remarks about actresses in his games, and to make homophobic or racist jokes. One former employee was directly quoted saying the following: David Cage has a very particular viewpoint on how he runs his studio, which in his own words he sees as a private or a semi-private space. He feels he has the right to say whatever he wants. It's his place. As an example, when David Cage was warned about how Detroit Become Human's controversial trailer shown at Paris Games Week featuring scenes of domestic abuse, and about how the, quote, misogynistic nature of the scene might cause offense, he was apparently not interested in any feedback or revisiting anything. Another instance that was pointed out apparently involved a burglary being caught on a CCTV, and after watching it, David Cage allegedly asked one of his employees, who was of Tunisian origin, something along the lines of, "Is that a cousin of yours?" All of these factors that allegedly contributed to a toxic work environment apparently played a big part in some 50 or so people leaving Quantic Dream between 2015 and 2016 due to depression or general burnout. Now, when Le Monde reached out to David Cage for a response on these allegations, he had a couple things to say, starting with how the allegations were, quote, ridiculous, absurd, and grotesque. More infamously, regarding claims that David Cage was homophobic or racist, he provided what is arguably one of the worst responses possible, stating, quote, you want to talk about homophobia? I work with Ellen Page, who fights for LGBT rights. You want to talk about racism? I work with Jesse Williams, who fights for civil rights in the USA. Judge me by my work. Yup, David Cage literally pulled the I have gay and black friends so I'm not homophobic or racist card. Furthermore, in response to another allegation accusing de Fondomière for sleazy behavior during staff parties, he said, quote, I'll be extremely clear, it's absolutely false. None of any of this happened at any evening event. The duo also issued a response via Quantic Dream's official Twitter page, releasing the following official statement on the matter. Articles published today level various allegations against Quantic Dream, its management, and employees. We categorically deny all of these allegations. Quantic Dream filed a complaint several months ago, and further complaints will follow. We invite interested parties to read the responses of our employee representatives and Health and Security Committee to questions submitted by the journalists prior to publication. Inappropriate conduct or practices have no place at Quantic Dream. We have taken and always will take such grievances very seriously. We value every single person who works at Quantic Dream. It is of utmost importance to us that we maintain a safe environment that allow us all to channel our shared passion of making video games. From there, when Kotaku reached out to Defendemier about the allegations at the time, he had this to say: Quantic Dream categorically denies the allegations. As for myself, I am furious and outraged by these accusations, which I take very seriously, and I will take all possible legal actions to defend my honor. A month later, on February 6, 2018, Quantic Dream released a second official statement on the matter, stating the following: Since January 14, 2018, Quantic Dream has been the subject of a veritable smear campaign by a few media outlets, based on slanderous remarks whose reliability and origin of the sources raise questions. We categorically refute the allegations against the studio, its employees, its leaders. We hope that these unfounded attacks and the propagation of completely erroneous information resulting from it will cease in order to protect our employees. We reiterate that to date we have not heard any complaints of harassment and discrimination. We confirm that 2 employees who entered the industrial court in 2017 were dismissed of all their claims by judgment on January 19, 2018, and that a third judgment in this case is in dispute. Several other legal actions are also underway to defend the reputation of our studio and to save the job of a French SME in the forefront in its field. We are confident in justice and hope that it can be decided quickly in a calm and peaceful atmosphere. Turns out they weren't kidding about legal actions, as Kotaku learned a few days ago on April 23, 2018, that Quantic Dream would be suing French media outlets Le Monde and Mediapart for their articles. Kotaku apparently learned of this when one of its reporters, Cecilia D'Anastasio, went to a preview event for Detroit Become Human in New York City on Thursday. When she asked what happened after Le Monde's article came out, Sony PR tried to shut the question down, but David Cage did let slip that they were suing the journalists. When Kotaku editor Jason Schreier reached out to William Alder, who wrote the Le Monde article on Quantic Dream, he confirmed the lawsuit and emphasized that, quote, "The story has been written sincerely, following a well-documented, thorough investigation, respectful of the principle that both sides must be heard. We stick with our information." Jason also confirmed with Mediapart journalist Dan Israel that his outlet was also being sued, though he asked not to be quoted in light of ongoing trial. As for Canard PC, the last of the trifecta of French media who collaborated to report on allegations against Quantic Dream, publishing director Ivan God told Jason that while they did get threatening letters from the studio, nothing came of it and the outlet has yet to be pursued with a lawsuit. Ivan also informed Jason that the sued publications will have to show that their stories were handled with fairness and good faith, that they reached out to all parties involved, offered their perspectives, and used appropriate caution while reporting on this story. And that about sums up all we know about the current situation. While it's hard for me to comment on whether Quantic Dream really is such an insufferably toxic work environment, whether the allegations on sexual misconduct, racism, and/or homophobia are true, what I will say is that David Cage's responses haven't inspired confidence in the eyes of the public. First of all, we know for a fact that the 600 photoshopped images featuring sexually inappropriate, homophobic, or even Nazi-themed imagery are real. Website Canard PC posted some of them in their article, and when you look at them, it's pretty hard to argue against the fact that they aren't in good taste. David Cage and Defendemier did say that they weren't aware of the worst or most offensive images, that they were only aware of the ones they thought were funny or amusing. God knows what they find funny or amusing, but if you ask me, when you let 600 such images make their rounds throughout a professional environment and you don't find that there is reason to strictly intervene unless they are really, really offensive, it just doesn't make for the best of impressions. To me, it shows that there was little consideration for the peers who might not enjoy or be comfortable about seeing themselves or their colleagues in that light. David Cage also responded with the following statement, as quoted by website Kotaku. "If we had been aware of these images, if we had seen them, we would have stepped in. But he creates them on his computer, on his free time. I'm not going to dig in the personal computers of my employees." Right, David, but you had seen some of these images. Many of them had been emailed company-wide. You knew of their general inappropriate nature, and yet you let these flow all around your studio anyway without consideration of your peers. This stuff has been going on for years too, with images dating as far back as 2013, so it's hard for me to believe that in all that time, any conscious effort was put into ensuring there were some limits or filters set for these photoshopped images prior to when the three French news outlets collaboratively called David Cage and Defendemier out on it through their sources. Perhaps most baffling of all is David Cage's response to allegations of homophobia and racism. I'm not going to claim one way or another, as I don't know David Cage and haven't experienced Quantic Dream's work environment firsthand, not to mention that allegations are just that, allegations. But when you have to resort to arguments as dumb as, "I've worked with gay and black people, therefore I'm neither homophobic or racist," that right there says a lot. David Cage also added, quote, "Judge me by my work." But if you look at his work, there is actually a lot of bad history there as well, particularly with Ellen Page. You may recall that there was that whole incident where a full nude model of Ellen Page was rendered into the final release of Beyond Two Souls, despite the fact that she never signed off on that, and despite the fact that her contracts have a no nudity clause. The scene in question involves Ellen Page's character taking a shower, and in the final game the camera was set up in such a way that her breasts or genitals were out of view. So the fact that David Cage still mandated that her breasts and genitals be fully modeled and rendered gives off a very creepy and sleazy vibe. No matter how you look at it, there is history of David Cage making a lot of morally questionable decisions or being morally negligent in his work, and reports from Le Monde, Mediapart, and Canard PC really don't stray too far off from that. I may not be able to boldly claim that David Cage or Quantic Dream's work environment are homophobic, racist, sexually inappropriate, and what have you while I'm sitting here on the sidelines, but I can at least surmise that David Cage doesn't seem to be the most considerate of people. The jury's still out on what comes of David Cage's lawsuit against the three French media outlets, but again, considering David Cage's history, judging by his work, it's hard not to perceive that there is some truth behind all the allegations made against Quantic Dream. The extremes of these allegations will surely be called into question, but the existence of the 600 or so inappropriate photoshopped images that go back years pretty much sets the tone. David Cage calls this whole debacle a smear campaign, but I think that the French media outlets merely reported what they were told by former employees who had qualms about aspects of their experience at the studio. And as long as they handle the story with journalistic integrity, which the Le Monde journalist confidently claims to have done, I cannot see David Cage, Defendemier, and Quantic Dream getting too far with this lawsuit. But I suppose we'll have to wait and see what happens. In the meantime, I'd love to hear what your take is on all of this in the comments below. With that, I would like to end this news update. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoy my content, consider supporting me on Patreon. It is completely optional, but donating even as little as $1 a month will go a long way in helping maintain this channel. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.